All right, welcome back to the Relationship Comeback Podcast. This is episode number 6. We're just getting bigger and better each episode. Today we're bringing on Hannah Allen. Hannah, how's it going today?
It's going good. I'm happy to be here.
What's been the best part of your Sunday so far? Besides obviously coming on the
Obviously,
Relationship Comeback.
right? The best part was I went to church and we had like an open pulpit, open mic type thing. So I actually got up today and yeah, there was just some really good messages and stuff that were like being shared and they resonated with me. And so I was actually thinking about coming on this podcast. And so I feel like when I was sharing my testimony about God and different things, I was thinking about how it might relate to like what we might talk about
Mm,
today. And so yeah, that's probably the best part.
cool. Can you, just thinking from other Christian religions, how crazy it would be to have open mic during worship services? Like, I feel like we're the only ones that do that,
Right?
but it's like it's the best or
It,
the worst. It's no in
yeah,
between.
that sometimes it's like, are we sharing doctrine up there or you know?
It's
But
just
it's also the best at the
yeah.
same time.
I love
So
it. That's cool. Well, Hannah and I have known each other for maybe like a year now. We were kind of introduced during the summer of 2025. We were in a seminary hiring group, and so we were at meetings once a week, and so we kind of just got to know each other throughout the course of that time. Although Hannah moved away from St.
she's
George, and
busy.
so now we're just sad. So we didn't have her this last go around, but I've just been always very impressed with Hannah and her story. Even before I even knew her story, you could just tell there was a spiritual depth to her uh that was earned and that wasn't like fluffy or fake. It was like, no, this is something that's real and genuine. And as I've gotten to know her, you kind of understand why. And you start to be like, okay, her advice, her guidance, her perspective, number one is something that's inspiring, but number two is something that more people need to hear, especially surrounding just the world of dating and relationships. And so, Hannah, I don't know if you want to just kind of start taking it away of maybe start from the beginning of kind of your relationship with Kage and then kind of walk us through just maybe a brief kind of what your experience has been there, and then I can ask any follow-up questions, and then we'll kind of dive into some topics regarding Hannah's story.
Sweet. Okay. Yeah, and I actually just have to give a quick shout out to Carter because getting to know Carter through the seminary program, I don't know if I ever told you this, but there was some times like after we'd have these like meetings at night and like we're always constantly trying to become better teachers and teach more like Jesus Christ. But like afterwards, you could just connect with the people that were in that group. And there was a few conversations that I had with Carter that I found super just like uplifting and just like, I don't know. I just felt like, yeah, I felt uplifted and felt encouraged. And I felt like in a real way, like sometimes God was getting messages through to me, like as you were speaking to me. So shout outs to Carter, and honestly, like any girls watching this that are interested in Carter, Carter's a catch.
Hey, yo.
So I can attest to that. So,
I
but
didn't
yeah,
pay her. I didn't pay her to say this.
no, you
So
didn't. You didn't know
all
I
of the
was gonna
millions
say
of girls listening. So
that. No, it's real though, and yeah, no, I think I've even told a few people that I ran into. I'm like, I just know this super awesome guy.
there
So
you
who
go.
knows? Maybe one
Who
day I'll
knows?
find someone to say up with.
Sounds good.
but but yeah, so my relationship with Cage, I went to school down in St. George, Utah, down at Dixie. I had served a LDS mission and I actually transferred from BYU down to Dixie to swim. And I moved down there and I just remember like the culture, like southern Utah versus Utah, like northern Utah was so different.
Yeah.
I was just like, wow, like
Like, where
people
am I?
yeah. I was like, this is so different. And so I dated some when I got down to Southern Utah, but I had one serious boyfriend and it ended and I was pretty heartbroken and I was just like like, I just don't know if I'm gonna find anybody down here.
Mhm.
And so I remember it was late one night. I downloaded one of the dating apps and I was just like, you know what? I know I want to eventually go to some kind of grad school. And so maybe I can just make connections with people. Like I really didn't have any high hopes that I like anything
You're like,
would
I'm
come
just gonna
out of
use
it.
this like LinkedIn. I'm just gonna
Yeah.
make connections.
For real, connections. I was like, maybe there's some like dentist or doctor or something like that can help get me into grad school. But I downloaded it and the second guy I matched with a few people, but the second guy I matched with, um, I remember well, he lived out of like I made my filter the whole United States because I was like I said, didn't have
Okay.
high
Yeah.
hopes. I was just like, I'm going in on this. And then I also was like, "Hey, you can't be too judgy." I had certain requirements, like, for me, like, I couldn't do a bunch of shirtless pictures and stuff. I was like, "Ah,
Right.
that's a no." But then I was like, "Okay, but you can't totally judge." So I was like, I brought the height filter down to my height. And so, yeah, the second guy I matched with, I could tell he was a pilot in the Air Force, but I remember after I matched with him being like, "Dang it, he's my height." I've never dated somebody my height
Mhm.
before. Which is 5'7", by the way. And I was just like, "Huh." But he started conversation with me, and I remember him being like using all the winky faces and being such a flirt. And I was just like, who is this guy? Like he's either I don't know. I think I initially thought like he's a player. But I
Mhm.
remember I'm like, okay, I gotta give people a chance. This is only messaging. I went on a few dates from the app, but there was another guy also in the military that I had connected with, and he had FaceTimed me. And so this guy, his name is Cage, he was like, well, like we should FaceTime. And I'd already FaceTimed this other guy. So I was like, oh, okay, like we're just getting to know all the
We're
people.
just FaceTiming everybody.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody. And I'm telling you, those military guys, like the jokes about them being like way more focused and like pursuing you, it's kind of true. So I FaceTime Cage and I remember that first FaceTime. I just got done babysitting my nieces and nephews, and I even told them I was like, just so you know, I might look kind of a mess, like but he got on the screen and he had dressed up. I remember he was like in a button-up shirt. And I think the first words out of my mouth were, well, dang, you look good. And he goes, you better believe I even smell good too. I was
Dang.
like, oh, snap.
He's spitting game.
Yeah. And he was just like, it's not every day I get like a date with, and I was just like, well, but we ended up talking for 2 hours until I was on an iPad. He had an iPhone, but I had an iPad. We talked till my iPad died. And it was like after that initial conversation that I was like, "Oh, snap. I would totally date a guy like that." But
Mhm.
he's in Oregon and I'm in Southern Utah and I'm on the swim team, which controls my life, and he's becoming a fighter pilot. But I was just like, I think after that initial FaceTime, I was kind of a goner. I was like, he's totally the type of guy I would date. I was like, oh man. So
Right away. So
yeah.
what kind of how did you guys make the decision to start dating and then eventually making the decision to get married? Kind of how did that process go for you guys? And then we can kind of go from there.
Yeah. So I flew up there a few weekends to meet him in person, and we were kind of like, hey, if we don't hit it off, it's okay because
Mhm.
I'd served my mission in Oregon. So the plan was to go.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. I think that was another like a little bit of a divine
Right.
intervention because my family thought I'd lost my mind. You met this guy on an app and now you're going up to meet him. And Cage knew that it looked crazy. So I remember he sent me his like driver's license, his credit history, his parents' name and address. Like enough information if we needed to like hunt him down, we
Do the
could.
background check or anything.
Yeah. And so I flew up there. We hit it off initially. And I think it kind of scared the both of us, like how quick we hit it off. And because I remember him telling me, Hannah, like, I really, really like you, but I want you to go back and I want you to date other people. It was like he wanted me to be sure
Mhm.
that like I really was interested in a guy in the military, because that was such a turnoff for so many people he had dated before, because he'd be living all over the
Mhm.
world in the country, and you move every 3 years, and it's like not the life for everybody. But I was like, no, I like it doesn't bother me that much that
Mhm.
you're in the military. And so we were dating, but I remember between that time like that we initially like met and started dating, I went on a date with one other guy. And I shouldn't have done this, but I kind of used it as leeway, because when Cage came in the fall, he was like talking with me and I was like, "Hey, I took your advice and I went out with one other person." And he was like, "Oh," and I was like, "Yeah, I even told him about you." And he was like, "Oh," and I was like, "Yeah," and he even said like if it doesn't work out between us, like he's still interested in getting to know me. And I was like, "What do you think about that?" And then Cage flipped it on me. He goes, "Well, do you still want to date other people?" And I was like, "No." And he's like, "Good." And I was like, "Good." And like that's all the conversation
Mhm.
was. I didn't even know we were officially dating until he made an Instagram post with me in it. And then I was like,
I think we're
okay.
official.
Yeah.
I
But
always,
for
I
oh,
always
go
feel
ahead.
bad, real quick, just for those people who like people are kind of figuring out they like each other, like, ah, but we should still go on dates. I feel bad for the people that are on the dates where they realize, yep, I want to just keep dating that other person.
Right. So true. I've actually the first date I went on when I came back from my mission was with a guy from my mission. And the whole day ended up him being like, I think I met this girl that I really like. And I was good, like, because we were friends, but he ended up marrying her.
No.
So,
Anyway, shout out to all those people.
yeah, it's real. Shout out to them.
Okay, so you
So,
guys make it official. How long do you date till you get engaged and then till you get married?
yeah, so even though the making it official part, I would count everything before that too.
Mhm.
So, I was probably like 7, 8 months. We got engaged. Like it was pretty quick in some senses. I mean, it's not the quickest military engagement I've ever heard of.
Or Utah?
Um, or Utah. It's true. Utah's got got us beat. But the thing I really appreciated is because we dated distance, all we had was like FaceTime. So we had to get to know each other like on a deep level of communication, because it's like we couldn't be distracted with just like oh, let's like go do something
Mhm.
today. And so yeah, we got engaged in January 2020. He surprised me in town, watched my senior swim meet, which was fun. And then the plan was to get married in May, but we're looking at the military. It's there's kind of a joke amongst military spouses, that like you go to the courthouse and just get married and then you plan a big
Mhm.
wedding later. And that's kind of what happened for us, because you realize to get all your military paperwork processed, you need to be married first. And so 4 days before he left for his first assignment in England, we literally took engagement photos and got married that night in my stake president's office. So,
Every girl's dream.
yeah, it was great. We eloped.
Yeah.
Yeah,
When was that? Was that
it was 2020.
in between January and May? So like how soon?
Oh yeah, that's February,
February.
February
Yeah.
2020. So literally, I think we were engaged for probably just over 30 days and we got married. So,
Can I, before we get to the next part of the story, can I ask you, 'cause one thing that I've seen a lot of people struggle with is like actually making that decision. Like I'm confident that this can be my person. How
mm,
did you get to the point where you're like, no, this is, I'm confident in making this decision? Is it something that just clicked? Is it something you're like, no, I'm going to decide to do this and I did it? How did you guys kind of feel confident enough to make that? Because so many kids nowadays are just petrified of making that decision because they don't want to be
right.
wrong. So how were you like confident in that?
Yeah, I feel like it can feel super weighty, right? And so I think Cage and I would talk about this. For him, it was probably a little bit different than for me. But for me, I just remember comparing comparing how Cage and I handled conflict to like previous relationships that I'd been in. There was just I honestly I think this was kind of a base for our relationship is like I remember telling people he feels like family, but he's not family. And I think it was
Mm,
really speaking to like the friendship of our relationship. And so for me, I think I knew that like he was my person when yeah, that like best friendship formed. And I just like I there was nothing that I couldn't bring up to him. And there was like I didn't ever feel like I had to walk on eggshells because it was like I knew he knew my intentions even if I was wrong or I did make mistakes. And I feel like I tried to reciprocate that for him. And so I think for me the safety in just like this person and I were both not perfect, but we're willing to work on it together for
mhm.
like however long it takes. Um yeah, I think there was peace in that. And so I was like, and we'd been in some interesting situations like missed flights and like this lady accused us of denting her car. And I just remember watching Cage handle like these different situations. And for me, I was like, and also watching how Cage like interacted with his family and his mom. I remember thinking if the bare minimum that he treats me is the same way he treats his mom, then I'm gonna have a great life.
Mhm.
You know? And I was like, and if that was like the bare minimum or like the way that he treated other people. So, yeah, I think for me there's just a piece in like his character and then also in how we were able to handle different conflicts that would arise. Um so and that like not that we were perfect.
Right.
But yeah, so I don't know if that totally answers it, but I guess it kind of came from some of it was more from a logical standpoint of like, could I see this man being the father of my children? And I was like, yeah, yeah. Like if he
Mhm.
was, with his strengths and his weaknesses, like I'd take it. So,
Well, I think what you're saying is cool because you're like we've seen each other in a bunch of different environments, and it's almost like you're just building confidence as you see someone react in different environments to say, okay, if they react this way, I can, foresee this turning out well. So it's almost like as you're dating someone, you need to see them in a ton of different environments so you can build confidence that like, okay, this is somebody that's going to react in these situations in a way that I can see we can make it work. So I think I appreciate that insight.
amen.
All right, so you get married. Walk us from there.
We get married and we didn't tell anybody
Secret.
because the emphasis was still going to be on for us both being members of the Church of Jesus Christ, like when we got sealed in the temple, which we were still planning to do in
Mhm.
May. Um, so I think we didn't tell anybody more out of respect. Like it was originally my parents' wishes that we didn't tell anyone. So we had 4 days together, 5 days. I was still in school. I remember joking because I took an anatomy test the night after we got married, which I thought was kind of funny. But then we
I just got that.
we we had to go get my military ID. So we literally kind of spent this little honeymoon phase. I would not do this for anyone else ever again.
Mhm.
But we spent it between like our parents' house, which like I said,
Nice.
I yeah. But it was hard. I remember when I saw him for the last time, um, I was pulling out like he like walked me to the car. He always opened my door getting into the car and out of the car. But he like I think he kissed me goodbye. He slipped like $80 into my back pocket, which he always does. And then I remember we'd done distance our whole relationship and I never would once cried saying goodbye to him. But I remember just this feeling of you're not going to see him again for like a while. And now, mind you, we're probably in that newlywed state and it's
Mhm.
hard to say goodbye. Um, but yeah, I didn't know how prophetic that feeling would be. Also, fun fact, those $80 ended up paying for the speeding ticket I got. The only ticket I've ever gotten was saying goodbye to Cage for the last time. And yeah, I was mind off in La La Land. I was going
Yeah.
fast. But yeah, so COVID hit. He got locked down in the UK. I got locked down in St. George. We finally announced to everybody that we did actually get married. And I remember being stressed of like, I really just want to go over and be with him, but do I plan a wedding? Everyone's like,
Mhm.
no, wait till he can come back over here and we can have a big celebration. But I'm like, I'm already married. Like, I just want to go to the UK. And I remember at the beginning of June, I got my passport and my family was like, no, just have him come back over here. And I was like, I don't know if he's ever going to get out of the
Mhm.
UK. The UK was more locked down than us. And yeah, and I just remember wanting to go over to England. And then June 14th was Cage's birthday, his 27th birthday. It was a good day because we FaceTimed twice. And then June 15th, um, I've said this so many times, but it still gets me. It was the one of the most difficult days, if not the most difficult day of my life. But that was the day that his plane went down over the North Sea, and yeah, Cage passed away in an Air Force accident. And yeah, I let that. I mean, it still sounds weird to say, but that's the day I became like a young widow, and yeah, so and to say I grieved was probably an understatement. A lot of it I ended up recording on an Instagram I had at the time. Um, but it's taught me a lot at the same time too. So
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. I know it's not probably something fun to talk about, and I appreciate your vulnerability of coming on here. Again, I'm sure people were like, for the first few minutes, they're like, this is just a regular story of how someone met, and
right.
you kind of realize as you're speaking, okay, this is a little bit different, and that's one of the reasons I love your perspective and insight is just because of how like real this is for you. And so I think just kind of starting off, one of the questions I'd asked Hannah to kind of prepare for was one of the things that I'm always impressed with her is how she used this impossible situation to bring her closer to God. I'm sure there's moments where maybe that wasn't the case, but to me, that's one thing that inspires me about you is how you turned to God in this moment and used it. You allowed Him to strengthen you, and I think even for myself, and I see lots of people. And again, dating is nowhere. I'm not trying to compare my crappy first dates anything to what you're saying, but when things don't go right, when things are frustrating, when things aren't working out, I think sometimes we blame and we kind of push God away. So I just kind of wanted to start by asking Hannah, kind of how did she or how does she kind of use this really difficult situation to grow with God, grow closer to Him versus just completely being like, all right, I'm done with you.
Right. No, I love this question, and this was actually something that had me pondering quite a bit. Um, the first thing that came to mind is like the full honest truth is there times in my life where I feel like I've been forgotten by God? Yeah, 100%. I cried about it to my dad like the other day. I was like, but I
Right.
think
We ended the story there,
right.
but there's like years worth of other things.
Yeah, there's other story. I think I've told Carter after one of our meetings after I was like, yeah, here's all the things that have happened. But it's true. But something that I've learned, and actually is like when I was reading this question that I reflected on is handling like the grief that has been in my life. Sometimes I just felt like I would navigate a day and I would offend people because I was sad and they couldn't
Mhm.
fix it. And I, yeah, like I said, I would offend people and I was just like so overwhelmed and I felt so misunderstood. But the moment I would get on my knees and I would try to commune with like who I believe is a loving father in heaven, I would just feel this overwhelming sense of just like understanding and compassion and like grace and just like and I just couldn't figure it out because I wasn't finding that hardly anywhere else. Like even the people I love the most, like
Mhm.
I think it was a real learning experience for them too, to see me go through what I went through. And those little interactions though, I think were just something I cleaved to because and I remember I'd read the scriptures too, and if you read the scriptures, the people in the scriptures, I'm like, their lives are so crazy. And you could easily be like, well, it looks like God doesn't care about them because of the trials they're facing. But what I've learned is, especially from the examples in the scriptures, is like God isn't always the cause of our suffering, but rather he allows it to happen for maybe purposes that we don't understand. And I the prime example of that is Jesus Christ, right? Being the son of God and like our loving Father in heaven who loved his son so much, probably more than we can comprehend, even allowed him to suffer
Mm.
for a greater purpose. And it's taken me a long time to, I feel like, trust in that, but I think those interactions in prayer that I would have would just remind me that like it's not God causing these things to happen necessarily in my life, but rather he's in my corner, and he's understanding, and yes, he is allowing it to happen, but he can consecrate anything we go through for our good. And I'm super empathetic for anyone that chooses a different viewpoint, because I think I was faced with the reality of those thoughts and
Can
but
you
for
expound
me,
on what thoughts you mean by that? On
yeah. So like people that like abandon their faith in God or get angry with God, or I think I was able to see how those were very like real and rational thoughts for people, when I went through what I went through. Like it was like you kind of are faced with paths. Like you kind of get to choose, like, do I believe there's a God in heaven and
right.
that there's more to this, or maybe if I do, like, am I mad at him? But for me, just the more I kept turning to him, the more I was like, he's like the only one that could handle all my emotions, my ups, my downs, my happy, my sad, my anger. And for me, I felt like I developed a closer relationship with him and just knew, like, came to know that, yeah, that he was the one in my corner. Like he was
Mhm.
weeping with me. He was feeling with me, and he was the one giving me grace when I didn't know where grace was. So,
I would just be curious, was there anything that you felt you were doing to allow yourself to have those experiences? Because I think sometimes, at least in my case, sometimes I'm really frustrated or mad or angry, and maybe I'm not doing it consciously, but maybe subconsciously, I'm like, I don't want to feel that love and support right now because I'm mad or I'm angry,
mm,
I'm frustrated. Is there
yeah.
anything you felt you did to allow yourself to have those prayers where you feel comforted and maybe not as much anger, or you feel supported instead of abandoned, even though the circumstances maybe aren't changing?
Right. Um, Yeah, well, I think it was a day by day thing. Like I don't know if it was like one experience above another. But I remember for me, it sounds kind of crazy, but for me, when Cage died specifically, I reevaluated everything. I was like my entire faith in God. I was like,
Right.
do I believe this? Like I'd served a mission, I've taught this, I feel like I've had experiences, but like, do I actually believe this? And so um, I mean, especially belonging to an organization that claims to be Jesus Christ's organization on the earth, right? Like the convincing evidence of that is the Book of Mormon. And so I I think I would just feel depleted, but I think there was just a little something in me that's like, I just really need to know if this is true. So
Hmm.
every day I would pick up the Book of Mormon and I would read. And sometimes like reading was like the only time I'd feel any kind of reprieve in the day. And so maybe also like that helps like to just but then, afterwards it's like I still had to face all the grief and like the frustration and the everything and um but yeah, if there was anything else, I think too just sometimes trying to explain myself to other people.
Mhm.
I for me in some situations I didn't find the comfort in other people. And so like my only source left was God. And
Yeah.
so I was
Like, I
like,
guess it's just me and you, so we better
yeah,
figure this out.
yeah, exactly. I'm like, well,
I would be
but
curious, anything that you did like emotionally or mentally or like a therapist involvement that you're like that was super helpful in allowing me to deal with a difficult circumstance but still connect with God. Because again, like I think
yes,
sometimes your mental state can just be like, all right, I'm not even in a place right now to be receiving revelation or inspiration. So is there anything maybe obviously everything spiritual, but outside
right.
of the CPR, church prayer, reading your scriptures, that you're like, I did this and it allowed me to kind of still turn to God even in moments of grief or suffering.
No, 100%. I would say a few things come to mind was first, like community, like when you do find people in the same boat as you, which like the Young Widow Club or military widows or anything, I found a lot of comfort in them because it's like, okay, they get it.
Mhm.
That was a moment of like, okay, they get it. they understand it. Two, I would say, yeah, finding grief resources and finding like um yeah, there was actually a lot, like, and I feel like understanding, for example, that grief is never gonna go away in my life, but rather it's gonna assimilate into my life was, like, super helpful for me because for a while, I mean, it felt more like a thorn in the flesh. Like, I was like, "This is the worst. Like, God, why can't you take this away from me?" Like, nobody likes me when I'm grieving is what it felt like.
Mhm.
And didn't I didn't want it, and it was a little bit frustrating, and, um but yeah, I think, yeah, educating myself with resources and the studies that have been done and, like, the continual change around what we know and understand about grief, especially by people who've been through, like, really traumatic experiences, I found super helpful, and yeah, I think those things helped soften my heart. And also like for me, it was I do talk about feeling sometimes that like grace and stuff, but sometimes I didn't feel it. Like I was so thick into like the depths of craziness going on and emotions and traumatic things that um it really was more of just like a hope or a hope that like that like God is there and that like who he is and who people say he is who he is.
Mhm.
And so yeah, I and like yeah, talking to people, talking to therapists, different things I think helped a lot. So
Well, I like how, and again, the the scale of grief and difficult things going on is clearly not the same. But I think when you're going through really difficult things or there's failed expectations and you want to get rid of those feelings, but I like how you said this is just it it's a part of you for forever. Like there's
mhm,
no way you can get rid of that, like you said, thorn in your side. So now you're like, all right, how can I become my best self with this now, like you're saying? Because you I think as much as we want to get rid of that I'm single or that I'm a widow, it's always going to be a part of you. Like even if and
mm,
when I get married, this terrible five probably 50 years of my life will
right.
will always be a part of
Not
like
50.
who I am, and it's something that
Right.
you're like maybe I don't want it, but
Right.
how do I allow it to continue to allow me to be my best self while also staying true and authentic to how I'm feeling and what I'm going through.
Mm,
Kind of
that's
moving into the next question I had for you, just because I think what again I don't know what your answer is going to be, but I feel like it will be very telling to be able to be like you have such a unique perspective now to be able to go back and tell yourself like day one you meet Kage what advice would you tell yourself, or what perspective would you tell Hannah to have going into that, year of your life about just because I think as someone who's single or as somebody who maybe is in the dating pool or even in a relationship, that perspective of like, hey, this is what I would tell myself could relate to anybody because I would imagine it's going to center around enjoying the moment or things like that. And so just kind of
Yeah.
hearing that from you, I would imagine is going to be very impactful. So if you could go back to Hannah, you match with him, he's using all the winky faces. Hannah from
And kissy face.
2025 goes back and visits Hannah in 2019. What is that conversation going to be? What are you going to kind of tell her? What are you guys going to discuss to try and help out Hannah for the next 5 years?
Hey, yeah. That's a beautiful question, by the way. And it almost reminded me of the question of like people are like, do you regret anything? And and honestly, I usually say no, like with my understanding that I had.
Hmm.
But the thing that comes to mind with my perspective now, like something I wish I could infuse into myself back then, is yeah, it's just people over things every single time, right? It's just like it was like I always tell people, I guess the one regret I have is not loving Cage more. Like that's it. Like I just wish, like for example, he loved it when I sent him pictures and selfies, and I hated taking selfies, but but I was like, okay, and I just wish I'd done that more because that was the way he felt loved and connected and and then also like yeah that Hannah going into dating Cage, like especially after we got married and he was in England, it was like I remember being so stressed and overwhelmed with like, do I plan a wedding? And I was like
Hmm.
grieving because I was just like, might not even have the wedding I dreamt of. And now I'm like, that was like compared to who I had found as a person and that
Hmm.
time I had with him, like I really don't even care that I didn't get any fairy tale wedding or celebration. Um, like, it was just, like, compare like, you can't there's nothing monetarily that can replace a person,
Hmm.
especially somebody you care for. Like, the worth of souls is great in the sight of God. Like, I feel like I've just learned that in such a very deep way. It's just, like, people are what matter, and you can't there's no like, you could give me $1 million or $1 billion in the wake of Cage's death, and I would just be like, I'd trade it back for him any
Right.
day. And so, yeah, so I wish, yeah, I could go back and just like infuse into her just like that perspective of it's just the people around you that matter. And there's no such thing as loving too much. Like, there's no such thing as like complimenting or being genuine like to the people around you because it's just like yeah, there's no such thing as loving too much, just
Yeah.
everybody, any kind of relationship, friendships, family relationships, or even like getting to know someone through dating, even if you don't end up with them, like yeah, no love is ever wasted. So
I would be curious now, and again, we can get into this maybe a little bit later, but now going into dating or even just like what you're saying, your relationships, how do you like live that way? Where you're like, all right, I'm not going, like you gave a couple of examples specifically with Cage, but like now when going on dates or now with your family or your friends, like how do you live in a way where you're like, I literally am not gonna, how'd you say, I can't love enough? Was that how
yeah,
you said it? Like,
yeah,
how
yeah.
do you live that way?
Yeah, so believe it or not, I grew up super introverted. Not super introverted, but like I yeah, I don't know. Like I still find myself I can be timid in some situations, but I just remind myself of like what do they say? Like dead people get more flowers than living people do. Like and it's true, right? And we
Mhm.
sing and we compliment people more, but I just try to like if I have a thought or like a genuine thought about someone, I just express it because it's like I'd rather them hear this living than me saying it a million times over when they're dead.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I would say like yeah, like even today at church, there was this girl that walked in and we're friends and I was just like she looks beautiful to me. And I was just like, so I made sure to tell her, I'm like, friend, like you look so beautiful today, you
Mhm.
know? Or like even in dating, um, I think as a widow, and yeah, maybe we can hit on this a minute later too, but like I think people sometimes think our heart is like only like has so much capacity to love. But what I've learned in the wake of my experiences is that it's not true. Like our heart can break, but then it can grow and it just keeps growing. And so like yeah, I don't know. There's like no like this is 100% of my heart and Cage has
Mhm.
got like 75% of it. You know? Like
Right.
it's not the case. It's like I love Cage deeply and fully and if I am lucky enough to love someone else again in my life, like my heart will only grow for that person, you know? And it's not I don't think there's like a measurement of yeah. So, yeah,
How
I
did you come to that perspective? Because again, I would
yeah,
imagine the phone call comes and over the course of the next few months, you're like, I'm never dating again. Like that is the
it
worst
was.
thing, whatever. Like I'm gonna be, I'm just gonna be a nun,
I was.
whatever.
Yeah.
Like, you
It's
know,
so real.
but then I'm sure over the course of these 5 years, you've kind of had to wrestle with that of like, can I love, in different ways, or how does this work? Because again, like you're like, I love him with everything I have. How did you kind of come to that perspective where you're like, no, it's not like percentages, it's just growth.
Yeah, it's I don't I in a real way I feel like God was working on me for a long time. Like it will be 5 years this summer because I was like first 3.5 years. Don't even mention dating to me. I was like, never. And honestly, I think it was okay for me to be in that headspace because there's a lot I needed to process.
Right.
Um, but I think through the example of other widows and friends and watching them, and really like listening to their experiences, like none of them loved their first spouse any less or their second spouse any less. And I was just, and I really value them, like their experiences because of yeah what they've been through and and yeah, just talking with people, and I remember talking actually with the former mission president. He's just like, "Well, it's kinda like children." And he's like, "When you have your first child, you think there's no way I can
Mhm.
love another baby this much." And then you do. And I'm like, it and that's like a concept I feel like is more accepted, right? Because it's a more common thing.
Right.
Um, but yeah, for me for a long time, it's just like I think I just never anticipated I would have the opportunity to love again. And so it was just like, well, that's not even an opportunity, like that's not even a thing.
Mhm.
But yeah, just hearing these other people's experiences and stories. And then when I did open up myself to dating after 3.5 years, and even though I dated somebody and it didn't work out and it was for the best, I learned firsthand for myself that like my care and love for that person was only in addition to it didn't take anything away from my love for Cage. And I think it taught me a lot more about like how God loves too. And I was just like, whoa. Like I don't know. I think I had put limits
Right.
on what love looks like and how that works. But yeah, when you get put in interesting situations, I think yeah, God teaches you things about that you never even comprehended before. So
He's just like stretching your heart for 3.5 years, getting you ready for
yeah,
that.
he's no, for real though. He's like, Hannah's a stubborn one. And I'm like, I am.
You're
So
like, I feel like we could have learned this lesson a different way, but
yeah.
I
But
guess you'll consecrate this affliction, and I learned it. So thank you.
right. Exactly.
But I think kind of getting into the last kind of question that we wanted to talk about is again, like if you this world of dating is already difficult as it is.
Oh,
Living
amen.
as a widow, I'm sure just brings an entirely different set of challenges. And so again, I would imagine it's not a highly represented demographic of dating podcasts or dating Instagram reels or whatever. Like I'm sure there's not just a ton of like conversation around this. And so kind of this discussion of, all right, how do we create a healthier relationship around this type of dating? Like what's something just as in your experiences and your um past, like you said, almost 2 years of at least being open to
Mhm.
dating, that you're like, man, I wish we could do more of this, or I wish people understood this about our situations or things like that, just so that we can start the conversation of, all right, how do we make this a healthier, more open, more loving environment for everybody in it? Because it stinks for everybody. let's
Amen.
not let's not make it worse by stigmas or by treating people this way. So what were some of your thoughts kind of regarding that, of your kind of specific situation of widows and kind of dating, and how we can create a better environment around that?
So true. Yeah, a few thoughts. The first one was, I remember when I first started dating, I went and looked at what the internet had put out about widows, and
Mm.
it was like red flags of dating widows. And I read through all of them and I was just like, I have no chance at any kind of relationship ever again. Like, there's no way. Um, and but I
Do you
think,
remember what some of them were? I'm just curious.
yeah,
Like,
it was
what
like
is the stigma? What are
yeah, some of the stigmas, I mean, I would say it depends on when you start dating a widow, right? Because widows are gonna have a pretty guarded, soft spot around the person that died, especially if they were in a loving, healthy relationship. And so I remember some of the red flags were kind of like spun that way. Like they're like, oh, if you, because but some of them were more reasonable, right? Where it's like, well, are they keeping you like a secret from people? You know, are they willing to like open up and be in a relationship with you too, and different things like that? And so, um, I just remember reading it and being like a little bit defensive for the widows because I was like, okay, like dating a widow is not for the weak. And so
to put that
I
on your dating profiles?
right? Dating a widow is not for the weak. No, yeah, and our dark humor, man. It's
Yeah.
anyway. Yeah, it's unique. And so I think the thing I boiled it down to was just like widows know that it will take a unique and special person to be in their life and to be able to hold space for the person that they loved before. And like I think young widows and widowers, we acknowledge and accept that like that's not for everyone.
Mm.
So we and
Which
so
I think to me has been, I've been so impressed by your perspective on that, that
mm,
you give people so much grace in being like, I understand this isn't for everybody. So I think always been something that impresses me, because to me, someone rejects me, I'm like, you're the worst person in the world. I hate you. Like, don't ever
right.
talk to me again. And you're just like, hey, it's not for everybody.
It's
I'm
not
just
for
like,
everyone.
maybe I should stop being so dramatic.
No, it's fair. I mean, I feel like it's natural instinct, even knee jerk for me sometimes be like, "Are you kidding me?" But but even like I said, when I first read all these red flags, I kind of went. I think it was a paradigm shift in the fact that going back into dating, it's like I actually this time have zero hope. Like, I mean, not really, but that's kind of how
Mm,
it felt. I was just like, "There's no way." But recognizing, okay, that it's not for everyone, but being open that there could be, like it could be for somebody, you know? Um, I think just like that open communication is huge. And so like, yeah, if somebody like for young widows or widowers, like if somebody is dating them and they're just like, you know what, like your involvement with your late spouse or their family is just like too much for me. I think there's just yeah, natural respect of like, okay, that makes sense.
mm,
And just like that communication is like, oh, okay. Cause I think widows go into it knowing that there would be like healthy boundaries, you know, in different ways. Like, yeah, there would just have to be healthy communication put in place. Um, and because I think a widow's biggest fear is feeling like that second person that comes into their life won't ever feel like they're enough
mm.
or they won't ever feel as loved, even though because there is somebody else there too, right? And so, um, Yeah, so I mean, that's a widow's big that's their
What
big fear.
what
But
advice would you give to, guys going on dates with you, or girls, for widower, like to create that environment where maybe you're coming from that perspective sooner of trying to create that type of open communication of like, hey, this is
hmm,
the boundaries we need to set. Like, is there anything
you're
you
right.
can do initially, or you're like, I wish this would happen more frequently, or I wish this would happen at all, anything like that, that you're like, this would really help create a relationship where that's happening.
Yeah, I would say if you are interested in a widow or widower, do not be afraid to ask about their late spouse.
Hmm.
Because in doing so and creating that open dialogue from the beginning, you'll start to get to know for yourself, like, is this something, like, what kind of boundaries would I need, or is this something that I can handle? And for the widow or widower, it feels like this is a part of me I don't have to hide, because sometimes it feels like that. Like, I think as a widow, sometimes in dating situations, it feels like, can I bring Cage up? Like,
Right.
and
You're
it's
like my
a
other husband.
yeah,
Like,
my
how do
other
I bring that
husband,
up?
just so you know, yeah. But he's so integrated into me and my life that it feels like if I don't, or if that gets shut down often enough, it feels like you that's a part of me, and if you can't accept this part of me, then you can't really accept me either.
Hmm.
Um and so yeah, I would just say, yeah, don't be afraid to like ask or talk about it, or ask about them, or ask, or even just ask simple things of like, how do you want to handle their death anniversary? How do
Hmm.
you want to handle their birthday? Like things like that. And I think as a widow, I try to be kind of proactive in that too. Like if I get into a more serious relationship, being open about like, yeah, I'm kind of griefy today. Or like, cuz I don't know if my whole life, like, that I'll have times where like I just get sad about
Hmm.
Cage, and that's something, yeah, going back to like other things we talked about, but I've just had to accept like that's going to be a part of my life. And the hope is like if you did find someone else, that they'd be able to hold that with you, or at least just be there. They don't have to understand it.
Hmm.
I think widows acknowledge that. Like, we don't expect anyone to understand it unless, they've been through their own thing. But um yeah, more so just worried like, is this gonna affect me being able to show up for somebody else or make them feel just as loved or valued? So
What advice would you give to widows of like, hey, what can we start to do to create a healthier
Ooh.
environment in this, of like, hey, like I've seen this work, or I've seen this not work for me. Because again, like I would imagine, just a guy going on a date with you, he's probably like, I have no idea how to
What?
even handle this situation. So I'm sure you kind of have to take the lead
Oh,
on that.
exactly.
So like for you and your experiences, you're like, this, I think we as widows or widowers can do this on dates to create a better environment, or in our relationships to be like, all right, we're creating a healthy environment where we're able to grieve, we're able to have that person be a part of our lives, but also be open to kind of this other aspect of relationship.
Yeah. My advice for widows and widowers, I would say, is don't be afraid to bring it up either. So, because if you feel like you have to hide it, then that's not a healthy relationship. So yeah, find ways to talk about it, and then, but like, don't just, I guess in a real way, like for example, if something makes me sad and I ended up crying about Cage for whatever reason, I might bring that up, like, if I'm getting to know someone in a dating relationship, but then I'm also gonna be like, don't be afraid to ask that person, like, what are your thoughts?
Hmm.
Like, what do you think about this? You know? Or yeah, what kind of, or and don't be afraid to like ask, getting to know somebody else, like, what would you need to feel like loved and supported? Um like if I have a bad day or something, you know? So I just, yeah, I think just the for widows, just encouraging that continual open conversations because I don't know. I don't know how to do this. And the ones
Right.
that figured it out, I'm like, I don't know how you all did it either. But I do think there's power in just communicating because when things are left unsaid, that's when resentment builds
Hmm.
and things fall apart. And so, um, yeah, I would say if don't like if you might really like someone as a widow, like really like somebody. But if you bring it up and it doesn't go well, then you kind of know like that's not your person.
Hmm.
So so don't be
Pretty
afraid.
pretty easy filtration process
Yes,
right there.
yeah, it'll help you weed things out quicker.
Yeah. I would just kind of, as we wrap up, I would love to know your thoughts or experience on the role that Cage has played since he's passed away in not just your life, but even just in, or not even, sorry, not even just in dating, but just in your life. Like how has that connection or support grown, or like what kind of role has been played there? Because I would imagine there is strength that comes from there, or connection that you can have. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but I would imagine that's helpful for widows to understand maybe ideas on how to use that person as a strength, as a support, as like a cheerleader. Like, do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh, 100%. I love a lot of young widows that I've seen and talked to, and even the one like the ones that have gotten remarried. They always talk about their late husband as like a guardian angel. And I would say that's a pretty accurate description. Like even in my own experiences, I feel like Cage set such a standard of care for me to like I like if I were to yeah, fall in love again, I wouldn't expect to find exactly Cage,
Mhm.
but there were certain attributes and characteristics that I feel like would be an underlying theme. um and I remember once I was in this situation and I just felt like Cage was like, you know, I could almost just hear him saying be like, "Hannah, like I did not like live and find you and treat you the way I did for you to settle for less." I was like, dang it.
You're like, wait, you're seeing this? I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, oh snap. And so um yeah, so for like other widows, I mean, I think almost every widow I've talked to can confess like they've seen evidences of their spouse still being aware of them, or even I have this one friend, it was her fiance that died. He was a fighter pilot, but like the way that you know, I think there's just like small things that you're just like, okay, like they're still aware and they care, and um yeah, I if anything, it's a good standard to be like, okay, I had somebody who loved and cared about me so much. And so I shouldn't have like even though it could be super lonely being a widow, like keep your standards high.
Hmm.
You know? Because your first person would want someone just as amazing to come into your life. Um and so yeah, that's yeah, the cage is definitely still I don't know, it's funny. I do kind of sometimes I feel like maybe that it could just be more in my head or not, but I sometimes feel like I hear his thoughts and opinions about things. And so yeah.
You're like the Holy Ghost voice has just changed to his voice now.
Yeah, for real. Well, and the Book of Mormon says that angels communicate by the power of the Holy Ghost,
Mhm.
and like can testify to that. It's like the same way I feel the spirit, but it's like a caged thought. Like I don't know how to explain that, but yeah,
Like what instead of what would Jesus do? It's just what would Cage do? And you're
what
like,
would Cage do?
that's my moral compass now.
Yeah, for real though, for real.
That's
And Cage is
awesome.
pretty Christ-like, so it's probably not a bad one to go off of.
Pretty much the same thing.
Yeah.
Well, I can attest to that. Just as soon as I had found out about your story, like, and again, I don't really know how to explain it, but you can just like, you could just tell he's there, watching out, and you just feel like, okay, to what, make sure that she's okay. Like, you just kind of feel that presence around you, and so I would just imagine that's a huge role and support, constantly, even though obviously, you're like, I would rather have that not be the case, right? I am grateful for it.
Right.
Um, any closing thoughts or feelings, things you want to make sure that you share? Any last pieces of advice just surrounding this whole world of relationships with God, dating, self,
All the
anything?
things. Um, hmm. Yeah, I would just say, I mean, like even in that last conversation talking about how Cage is involved, people have asked me before when I chose not to date, is like, do you feel like your relationship with Cage is keeping you back
Hmm.
from loving somebody else again? Like, or Cage's opinion on it. And for me, it's kind of crazy. Cage and I actually had this conversation before he died. Like, I actually feel Cage's 100% support. And like, he was like, he just like, yeah, there's just like a higher level of love that I feel like it almost takes to like have that kind of support. But even those that didn't have those conversations before he died, I would say for my other widow friends, I think you can feel that. I think there's a perspective that you get from the other side that we don't quite have here. And for some reason, they know better than we do that it's all going to be
Yeah.
okay. So, yeah. And so, yeah, I think the overarching message with like God and dating and grief and everything is like the undercurrent is really like, is just love. And it's like, but it's like a pure love. And it's like and it is transformational. And so, yeah, those are, I think that's like my closing thought is like it all kind of goes back to just like love, which sounds funny. It sounds kind of hippie, but like it's true. So
No, I said this in my very first episode. It was just like, again, you pray and you hope that things will work out and everything will, but you kind of realize how much we rely on Jesus being who he said he was. You're like,
yeah.
I
Oh, amen.
everything rides on this. If he's not, we're cooked. Like we're done for. And so
He's so
you almost realize the immense amount of faith and trust that we have to have in him being that, again, for death, for sin, for resurrection, for comfort, like all of these things are like we better pray. But it, like you're saying, it's so cool when you can receive that reassurance, even from ministering angels or things like that, to be like, hey, this is going to work out. I don't know how it is.
but it's
Well,
got to because Jesus is, well, adding one more thing to that, like I remember talking to my mission president because he's kind of also, I'd say, instrumental in me opening myself up to the idea I could have someone else in my life. He's like, it almost takes more faith in Jesus Christ the second time to get married because it's like you have somebody, but do you have enough faith that like he could work it out if you add someone else in? And I'm
yeah. You're
like
like, I
these
don't know
are
if
the
I'm there
things I
yet.
wrestle with.
Yeah.
But it's true. But it's like if Jesus Christ is who he says he is, then do I have faith and trust that he accounted for this as well? Like that he account like even though, and there's a few stories in the scriptures of widows that give me a little bit more comfort that that is the case. But yeah, it's kind of it's it's a wrestle with God, but ultimately it goes back to, yeah, do we have faith in Jesus Christ?
We better pray and hope he is who he says he is. 'Cause again, like
Right?
I said, we're not in a pretty place if he's not. But anywhere people can reach you or reach out if they're like maybe struggling in a similar situation or they have questions or anything like that, anywhere people can reach out to you or find you at on Instagram or Facebook or whatever.
Yeah, so I have an Instagram. I have two Instagrams. One I've now dedicated into like a Cage memorial page.
Hmm.
It's like Hannah and Cage 17. You can message me on there, and then I have another Instagram. They're linked. You could probably find them pretty easily. I don't even remember the handle of that one, but I think it's Hannah Allen, Hannah H Allen. But yeah, I love connecting with people on there through that. Social media has actually been a really cool place for me to make connections with people and have ongoing conversations and change the conversation around grief. And
Hmm.
so, yeah, if anyone wants to connect, like send me a message through Instagram.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I just, again, I I appreciate you coming on and your perspective on like again to me I view you as like these scripture stories where it's like okay this is reality. Like life is really hard, life is really difficult, but we can get through it. You can do it in a positive manner, but I one thing that again I really value about your perspective is that it's very genuine, but you also allow for that space of grief, of sorrow, of doubts or question, whatever it might be, but it doesn't feel like faithless. It feels very faithful and faith filled. And maybe that's
Mhm.
the love that you're talking about. So I commend you on living that way. I love the phrase. What was it? You can't love enough.
Yeah, you can't
Is
love
that it?
enough. It's just you just can't.
That's gonna be the title of the
Right.
episode, and I know that you live that way, and I hope that people listening can start to live that way as even just an honor to Cage, because that's the way that I would imagine he would live. And so I appreciate you
Yeah.
taking the time to come on and know that all of our millions of listeners' lives are going to be
They're
changed. So
gonna be. They're
thank
gonna
you.
be. I'm like, Carter, this is like this conversation has honestly been super, yeah, impactful to me. It reminds me of our conversations just like after these meetings. And I'm like, I just there's a spirit to it. And so yeah,
Me
millions
too.
of listeners, man.
Yeah.
They're gonna come.
I love it. Well,
Yeah.
thank you for joining us again. This has been episode 6 of the relationship comeback, where we're learning to become the one so we can attract the one. We'll catch you guys next time.